instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Leaving a legacy has little to do with financial portfolios and buildings named after you, and everything to do with lives forever enriched because of the gifts you have generously shared in relationship. Being a star has little to do with one's name in lights on Broadway, and everything to do with the light one shines upon all whom one encounters. Being a son, a brother-in-law, an uncle, and grandson has little to do with how much you have in common, and everything to do with the ways you move through differences to find connection and companionship. Being a Christian has little to do with following rules and judging others or ourselves, and everything to do with wrestling with what it truly means to accept God's love, God's grace, mercy, and God's forgiveness, and then sharing oneself with others. Being a friend has little to do with being alike, and everything to do with choosing to turn together and in the same direction share a pathway for a season, whether in choir or vacation Bible school, in the Order of St. Francis, at a community meal, or in one of the many quiet conversations punctuated with quirky humor. Being generous has little to do with how much one has and everything to do with how much one gives, whether it be undivided attention, the presence in overnight monitoring to assure safety for homeless families, or an all-expenses-paid vacation to Frankenmuth. Being strong has little to do with never being sick or weak, and everything to do with compassion, empathy, service out of one's own experiences of health, fragile health, and a keen awareness of the preciousness of life. But I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, because knowing Brother Kris meant that you are already a recipient of their legacy, a recipient of their friendship, and have experienced their strength and faith, been uplifted by their prayers, heard their singing, and most likely laughed or groaned at their jokes. Knowing Brother Kris meant that someone listened to you and was fully present with you in conversations. It meant that someone patiently traveled with you through questions and didn't rush to give unhelpful answers, but was your steady companion in the seeking. Knowing Brother Kris meant that they could be counted on to give and help as much as their increasingly frail body could possibly allow, and always with great generosity of spirit, followed by apologies for not being able to do more. Knowing Brother Kris meant that you were invited into their struggles and pain and asked to walk with them in the valley of the shadow of death. Authenticity about how hard life could be was one of the ways Brother Kris invited others into their own truth. Knowing Brother Kris meant that you got to see what strength and perseverance and joy and authenticity and faith and love look like. I could go on, and you could go on. And in the coming days, I hope we will go on as we remind one another, tell stories, help us to know what it meant to be blessed, and then to continue the blessings by remembering and telling stories. My friends, this service is a service of resurrection. We gather today to celebrate Brother Kris's life. The life they lived here on earth that we got to share, and the life they continue to live in the ever-encompassing love of God, which we also will share one day. The gospel reading Brother Kris chose for today places the truth of the resurrection in the context of knowing and being known, giving oneself completely, and always looking out for and including the other. It's no surprise that the theme of this text was so evident in Brother Kris's life. And even though certainty was rare, the strength of this resurrection truth and the way it was proclaimed was what Brother Kris wanted for all of us to hear today. The Old Testament reading they selected provides an image of Brother Kris's calling, and actually the calling of all Christians, to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and release to the prisoners. Brother Kris knew about being imprisoned in an ever-weakening body. They knew about being brokenhearted about what would never be able to be experienced. And they knew about the freedom that comes with knowing freedom in God and release from the imprisonment of hopelessness. My friends, Brother Kris knew the connection between gratitude and freedom and always genuinely found something to name for which they were grateful. Instead of being bitter about a 10-plus year battle with cardiac failure, Brother Kris expressed gratitude for all they got to do, for the many ways they got to live on what they called borrowed time. On Palm Sunday, just a few weeks ago, when we were making plans for this service, Brother Kris shared with me that they were ready to die. They were so over the limitations of this life and so ready for the freedom of the next life. Asked if there were any concerns, Brother Kris, fully true to themselves, spoke with compassion about being concerned for their family and their friends and the grief they would experience. Further conversation revealed that they wanted their parents, sister, brothers, brother and sister-in-law and nephew, that beloved circle that always came together to share Sunday dinner and had shared countless family experiences, to be assured that all will be well. The truth is, in the big picture, all will be well. But for now, there is grief and there is loss. And today, we celebrate Brother Kris's life. A compassionate, difficult, generous, playful, and faithful life. We name our sadness at their death and acknowledge that we will miss them so much. But we stand in the light of the resurrection. We stand in the power of the love that will not let go. And we stand in God's forever presence with us, being with us wherever we are and in all of the places that we go. For my friends, as Brother Kris and I often reminded each other, There is nothing that cannot bear the love of God, and there's nowhere we can go where the love of God is not there with us. And I also want to remind you that Brother Kris is not gone. They live on in this life, in our memories, in the moments that we recall, the lessons they taught in and by their life, in the legacy of what it meant to be Brother Kris's family, to be Brother Kris's church, to be Brother Kris's friends, and to be Brother Kris's brothers. So when you miss them, be grateful and be inspired by the nature of their character, their faith, and their life. Strive to exhibit the qualities in them that inspired you, and you will realize that they are still with you. There's something else that you need to know about the resurrection. Like the kingdom of heaven, which is both now and yet to come, resurrection is like that too. God's power of the resurrection lives and acts today as we open ourselves up to God's grace and redemption. And that power of resurrection can bring back to life today that which has died. So whether it's a hope or a dream, or a relationship, or a calling, or an understanding, or an expectation, or a truth that has died, consider God's love when you think about that, and consider the power of the resurrection. Belief, a grace gift, whether by heart or by will, can be a pathway back to life. And one aspect of belief is faith, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So in faith, let us comfort one another, express gratitude for the gift of Brother Kris, and be awakened today and every day to the power of God's love through the resurrection. Let the Spirit of the Lord be upon you. May you bring comfort to one another as you mourn. May you offer to one another a garland instead of ashes. May you offer to each other the oil of gladness, a mantle of praise and gratitude instead of a faint spirit. For then, like the prophet said, then our memories and our hope moving forward will be called oaks of righteousness, planted by the Lord to display God's glory. Amen. Amen.